Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Kramer for MRC-TV. Today we're speaking with Sarah Parshall-Perry, a legal fellow from the Heritage Foundation, to discuss what's currently going on in the Democratic push for court packing. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So last Thursday, Democrats introduced a bill to expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices instead of 9. We want to know, is this legal and how exactly would this happen?
So the short answer is yes, it is legal. Congress does have constitutional authority to determine the size of the federal judiciary and could, if it wanted to, expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court. However, with the exception of 5 years during the Civil War, there have been 9 justices on the Supreme Court since 1837. So what this is trying to accomplish is an overt political power grab in which the judiciary would be the third branch of Democratic control. In my estimation, there is probably a little bit of ill will about the fact that our previous president got as many federal judicial nominations and specifically as many Supreme Court seats as he did. And so this is an overt attempt to turn it into an ultra-political body, which Congress in the past with FDR has determined to be unconstitutional.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that it seems like there's a split among liberals. Liberal Justice Breyer is against court packing, as well as the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
9 seems to be a good number, and it's been that way for a long time.
So exactly why are Democrats still pushing this? Is it just to show President Biden's base that they're doing something that's going to overthrow the court, or do they really think that they can push this and make it a reality?
Well, based on how close the margin is in the Senate, I do believe that the push is in part motivated by who controls both chambers right now of Congress and who is sitting in the Oval Office. That would, of course, be the natural trifecta when we know that the rule of law and the judiciary is the single stopgap against hard left partisan political power grabs like the one that we're seeing currently in the Senate. Again, you bring up 2 very good points. There have been not only previous justices who have indicated their own displeasure with the concept of expanding the number of seats on the Supreme Court, but this has failed in the past. When FDR attempted this, trying to push through much of his New Deal legislation, he also extended through a bill his attempt to try to get an additional seat onto the Supreme Court, and Congress flatly refused to do that. So it really is at odds with the majority of what the Democratic appointed justices in the past have themselves said, but that also can demonstrate precisely how hard left the current modern political Democratic Party is.
Yeah, well, something that I'm trying to understand about this whole thing is that you could still end up with a conservative or liberal majority with 13 as much as you could with 9. So exactly how does this help them achieve their ends? Is it really just a short-term fix because they're upset about President Trump's last few appointees?
Yes, that's precisely what it is, because based on what the appointments look like and who controls, obviously, the White House and is in a position of power to appoint a number of justices, it is obviously unprecedented to have had as many Supreme Court nominations as President Trump had. And again, I do think this is sort of partisanship and sore losership on the part of the Democrats, because based on the composition with, for example, 13, there are still uneven numbers. And based on who, for example, wins the White House in 2024, there could be changes to that as well. We still have a number of older judges, but the conservative majority as it stands now is a young conservative majority. And that probably bothers the Democrats the most because they'll be sitting on those benches for quite some time.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of me, I don't want it to pass, but part of me thinks it would be funny if it did backfire.
Right.
Now, some are speculating that President Biden has an agenda behind this, that basically his coalition is looking into the issue of the Supreme Court, but that legislation is really just a distraction so that his commission can recommend something like judicial term limits or a rotating judicial seat, and then Biden can come out and kind of push the agenda and declare himself as a moderate. Do you think that that could be the motivation for all of this?
I do. Again, we need to look back at the independence of the judiciary. And because the judiciary is bound toward interpretation of the law as written and nothing else, it would be a premier opportunity for President Biden to use this as the advancement of a hard left agenda. Again, we have one stopgap against some of these more radical legislative introductions, including things like the Equality Act, in which the Supreme Court has stated specifically things like biological sex do matter. And while they are implicated in situations like sexual orientation and gender identity, they have uniquely and determinably refused to rule on questions that are not before them. So rotating the judiciary, adding additional seats, setting up term limits would again turn the judiciary into a third political branch, not by any stretch what the founders intended.
Yeah. Last question. Do you actually think this is going to pass?
I hope not. And I do believe that there are enough Democrats of good and common character and sense to be able to push back against it. And again, the Democrats need a 60-person majority to be able to effectuate a filibuster on this particular bill. I am hopeful that we are going to see more good sense and more reasoned Democrats come out in opposition to a bill like this.
Gosh, I hope you're right. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your expertise on this issue.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.